Hello, everybody. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet, joined by Ken Weave from Sportsnet. Together, we are Kenny and Renny, and this is our weekly long-form Kenny and Renny show. We absolutely love these. It's a time to dig in a little bit deeper with some of the characters around the Canadian sports scene, usually having to do with hockey. Sometimes we dive out, but it's a hockey-centric show today here as we have Meaghan Mikkelson, two-time gold medalist at the Olympics, silver medal in her trophy case as well, and Jason Bukala, who was the director of amateur scouting for the Florida Panthers. And if you were watching our coverage during trade deadline, he joined Sammy the Scarf, who you all know very well, in breaking down some of the stuff that was happening. I'm excited for this one, Ken. I'm excited for them both, but just the idea of kind of getting the scouts look behind the scenes of all the stuff that has to line up around trade deadline. We'll get his thoughts on, what the Winnipeg Jets were able to do, trying to piece together a different looking third line with Mason Appleton coming in and Zach Sanford. And one of the reasons the Jets did that is because they still firmly believe that they are on the way to the playoffs. Now, it's interesting, Ken, because you get around this team, and what you feel in covering this team is that the Jets are doing really well lately, right? Like, we're covering way more wins than losses all of a sudden. The feelings around the team are really good during the morning skates and practices. Not that there's a lot of practices lately, but this team is having fun and they're laughing and it's a good time. And everything about this team tells you that things are going good and that hope is alive. And you talk to Kevin Cheveldayoff, he feels that way. The coaches feel that way. The players feel that way. And then, I do Jeff Merrick's show, or we do the trade deadline, and we talk to some of the people behind the scenes. Kevin BX is one of those who when you have those conversations, and I was on Jeff Merrick's radio show today at noon, when you hear it from the outside, where you kind of get out of this bubble of hope, there's a little bit more of a harsher look at what the numbers say. And the numbers say that this is going to be a real long shot. And there's a number of reasons for that. One, 3 points behind. Dallas doesn't have the toughest schedule down the stretch. They have 2 games in hand. Win those, suddenly you're 7 points up. And this gets to looking really, really tough. But never mind that, the fact that of the teams that the Jets are going to kind of be duking it out with, it's Vegas, Vancouver, and Dallas. And those 3 players play each other a whole bunch of times. So it's going to be a bunch of these situations down the stretch where even when the Jets win, they lose because one team, is going to lose some points, but another one gains them. So not only do the Jets have to play really well, but they need the 3 of those teams to lose in a very kind of specific way in order to have that path open up for them. I just, before we bring in Meaghan Mikkelson, I just wanted to get your thoughts on kind of the hope inside the market versus the maybe lack of hope outside it.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting. I mean, as Elliot likes to say, the math isn't good for the Jets. And part of the reason that is that they'll be going for another chance today at winning 3 in a row. They haven't won 3 in a row since January. So if you need to go 15-5 in your last 20, that will require a couple times of getting to three in a row and beyond. So that's been the issue for the Jets and their waves of inconsistency. But I mean, they're playing better. And when Connor Hellebuyck plays like he did and making 42 saves against Vegas, there would be reason for hope. I mean, you can't ask for that every single night, but when he gets the vintage performances out, then you sort of see why there would be reason for hope, Sean, right? And that's the thing. And we talk about recency bias all the time, but the St. Louis Blues of 2019 are a great example. I mean, now every team believes they're in it until they're eliminated. So that's probably why the Jets are feeling better about themselves. And the other part too, Sean, we talked about this the other day after the game. The fact that Nikolai Ehlers has been back for 10, 11 games now, and 10 points in those 11 games. He's been absolutely, 10 games. He's been absolutely outstanding. So it sort of gives them a glimpse of what they may have had they had Ehlers for the whole season. But now that they do have him, now they feel like they can go on one of those runs they would have gone had he not missed a quarter of a season, I guess. So interesting times. And the other part of that, Sean, we know is the schedule. The Jets they're in a stretch of 6 consecutive games against teams currently below the playoff line. So that makes those other teams dangerous because the consequences are not the same. But it also means the Jets should keep themselves in the race for a little bit longer here and then see what happens from there.
Yeah, and then it gets really tough. Basically 18 games left in the season, 9 against some teams that have been pretty battered up, although a team like Buffalo is turning things around, but 9 against some really, really tough opponents. They've got room for 5 losses. So, they're playing teams like Florida, Tampa, Carolina, Rangers, Toronto, Colorado twice. I mean, if you only lose 4 of 9 games against those teams, you've done really, really well for yourself. But what you've done is left yourself room for one loss out of those remaining 9 games. So it's a tough one. It's going to be tough for them. We'll dig more into that after the game tonight, where we'll either be talking about another big Jets win or an absolutely crushing defeat at the hands of the Ottawa Senators. But before we get to that, we want to get to the good stuff here today. We're going to bring Meaghan Mikkelson into the program. So happy to have you here. And the one thing I noticed when digging into some research on you, Meaghan, is you truly come from a hockey family. Give me an idea of what it was like to grow up in that environment and what makes your family such a hockey family.
Yeah, well, I think having my dad, having played in the NHL for, I think it was 4 years, and he holds the infamous record for the worst plus minus in one NHL season. Very proud to say that's my dad. But yeah, I think just knowing that he played at such an elite level, that was something that I think my brother and I always looked up to. We watched Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday nights at home in our living room, and knowing that our dad played at that level, I think was really, really special. And then looking at my great uncle having won a Stanley Cup and the Calder Trophy, that was amazing too, knowing that he played at that level as well and what he accomplished. So, just having, I guess, hockey in the bloodlines, it was something that was always fun for us. And when I started playing, I have so many memories of just being on the outdoor rink with my brother and my dad. And we spent hours and hours out there. My dad always said that the day that my brother or I could beat him around the rink, he would give us $50. And then it was funny because when that day came, my dad said that because his knees were bad, he couldn't skate anymore. So that deal was then void. So
that's ridiculous.
I think my dad owes us each $50.
I think so too. Well, what a backdoor way to get out of that one.
Yeah.
Meaghan, obviously the bloodlines drew you in, but what attracted you to the game and what kept the game such an important part of your life?
Oh, I think what drew me in actually was my younger brother. I started playing ringette first. When I was young, there wasn't a lot of girls hockey. There was none in Regina where I was born. Lived there till I was 8 years old, but yeah, there was no girls hockey. So I played ringette. And it was one day when my brother's little Timbits team went to the outdoor rink and they were all playing hockey. And I said, that was something that I wanted to try as well. So from that day on, I wanted to play hockey. I remember wanting to play in the NHL when I was a little girl. And then eventually when I saw the first Canadian national team play in the Olympics in Nagano, Japan in 1998, I was 13 years old. And from that moment on, it was my dream watching players like Hayley Wickenheiser, Cassie Campbell, Jana Hefford, Carolyn Willett. They were my idols. So I think from that point on, it was full steam ahead, Olympic gold medal.
We'll jump into the Olympics. We've got plenty of time for that. I'm still interested in the family connections. And one of the advantages of having a father who played in the NHL is clearly a guy who knows how to travel that path. You've kind of beaten down that path before you get there and can show your kids the way. But I would think, too, when your parents have made the NHL and your uncle has done what he's done, there's a lot of pressure that comes with that. Or maybe there isn't if it's handled properly. Did you ever feel pressure based on kind of the hockey family and what your family ahead of you had achieved? Did that pressure ever weigh on you? Or if it did at any moments, how did you handle it?
No, I don't think, I certainly never felt that pressure. I think my dad was always really great at mentoring us, giving us advice when we wanted it or when he felt like we really needed it, but he never pushed us or pressured us. I think that if we wanted to be successful at hockey, he knew that that was something that we needed to take control of ourselves. So I never felt any pressure. I don't think that my brother did either. It was just really great to have such an amazing resource and someone who knew so much about the game and who had been through a career where I think looking back, if he could have done it again, he would have done some things differently. And he was always really great at, teaching us lessons. Any hurdles we had to overcome or adversity we faced, he always just had such amazing advice. And then just knowing the game so well, if he saw us do something and thought we could try something different, he never pushed it upon us. He never was really super hard on us, but he gave us feedback in a way that was, constructive and positive. And it was that way from day one, I think up until this very day.
Meaghan, were you someone who played a ton of other sports? We know that nowadays a lot of people kind of specialize so early, but Sean and I both played a lot of other sports. It certainly helped us. Was that a factor for you as well?
Oh, I played pretty much every sport, you name it. I played it. I was a competitive swimmer until I was 16 years old. I played soccer, basketball, volleyball, tennis, badminton, golf, cross country, running. Pretty much everything. I think there was a few years in junior high where every sport that my school offered, I played. And I think that it's really important. I think that if you look at the best athletes in their respective sports right now, they're often the best all-around athletes as well. So I think that that's something really important. I have a 6.5-year-old son, and it's already, it's easy to get stuck in that, okay, you can play winter hockey, spring hockey, summer hockey, you can play hockey all year round. There's kids that start to train super young, but we're going to put him in lacrosse. We make sure that he goes swimming and he does other activities as well. So I know how important it was for me in terms of athleticism, just having a break mentally from the game, I think, is really important as well. I know that it's definitely something that I want my kids to do as well, is play other sports. Try everything.
I think of all the other sports that you tried, I'm most impressed with the swimming, because hockey players I know, they get big down low. It lowers the center of gravity. And most hockey players I know are sinkers, not swimmers. So good on you for pulling that off. I want to go back to that moment you talked about. I loved how you talked about being a young kid and wanting to make the NHL. And it sounds to me like when you saw that 98 Nagano women's team, it kind of opened up an entirely new world for you. Give me an idea of what it felt like to go from that moment. Because I know you wanted to make the NHL. I know you looked out and you didn't see any women on the ice there. So when this kind of world opened up to you, what did that feel like?
Yeah, I remember the only female that I saw playing in the NHL was Meaghan Mikkelson, and I had a poster of her up in my room, and I looked up to her tremendously. But yeah, seeing the women play in the Olympics in 1998, it was great for for me to look and see other women, other females, playing the sport of hockey, but in a different environment than the NHL. Yes, it's competitive, it's intense, obviously, but it wasn't the NHL and it wasn't males. So I think it was really important for me as a young female to see other women playing the sport of hockey and playing it at such an elite level where they're representing their country. I think that's so important for young girls to have role models and people to look up to, because I know how important it was for me.
How about you? And then when did that dream kind of start to become reality? Do you remember your first maybe Hockey Canada camp and what sort of things you took from that, knowing that it was now within your grasp?
Yeah, it was my first under 22 national team camp. I believe it was in 2003. So it was right after I graduated from high school, before I was going to play hockey at the University of Wisconsin, going into my freshman year. And I played on the under 22 team that year. And that was my first taste of wearing the Team Canada jersey, of representing Canada. It wasn't at the senior level, but it was really, really special. And then I think it was 2 years later, playing on the under 22 team again. We played against the Canadian Olympic centralization team that was getting ready to go to the 2006 Olympics. So just being on the ice with senior national team members, that was huge for me. And when I sort of felt like it might be in my grasp, but I didn't go to my first senior team camp until 2007. I was gosh, how old was I? 22 or 23? I can't even remember. And that's actually pretty old for a player to be going to their first senior team camp. And if you think about it, from, 1998 was when I said that I wanted to play for Team Canada. 2007 was when I went to my first camp. That's 9 years later. That's a long time. There's a lot of work and a lot of effort that went into it. But I think going to my first camp, that's when, I had a really good camp. I scored some goals and kind of started to feel like I belonged a little bit.
One thing I always find interesting about late bloomers in hockey is I think people have players when they're coming up have an idea of, if I'm going to make the NHL, I need to be, in the OHL or the Q or the dub by the time I'm 15, 16, if I want to be a high draft pick. And I definitely have to have performed by the time I'm 17. And then you get guys like, Kevin Bieksa, who we have had on this show before, who, plays junior B and then into junior A and then 4 years afterwards. A guy like Brandon Tanev is a perfect example, Ken, of a guy who quit hockey at 15, didn't pick it up again until they were 19. But I can only assume during those times and during your times that there's this feeling of falling behind. Like you said, you don't get to that place you've been trying to get to for it's 9 years. Did you struggle with some of those feelings? And if so, what kept you going to kind of get to your ultimate goal?
I don't think I struggled with it. I think that, again, I had my dad who was, really great in terms of giving me advice. And he always just said that no matter what happens, no matter if you make it or you don't make it, the most important thing is that you're able to look back and, say that you have no regrets, that you did everything that you could. So that was something that I always just really focused on was, doing everything that I could to get there. And if I didn't, then, yes, it's disappointing, but you get a tremendous amount of satisfaction out of knowing that you did absolutely everything you could. So that was really big for me. And, I look at everyone's path is different. And, I love my story and, the journey that I went on to get to where I got to. And, I like the fact that I graduated from university and I worked full time at a marketing agency downtown Edmonton for 10 months, 8:30 to 5, regular daytime desk job. Like I love that part of my life. And I would go to the gym after work or practice after work at night. And then I would be playing hockey on the weekends. And, I think that was a really important time in my career for me as well, because, I realized first and foremost that I couldn't work a full-time job and try to make the Olympic team at the same time. But, it was a grind. It was a lot of work, but it made me realize too that, ultimately my dream was to play in the Olympics and I would stop at nothing to get there.
Speaking of that journey, Meaghan, I got a couple of old Badger sweatshirts that don't fit me anymore. My cousin Dwayne Dirksen played there on the national championship team in 1990. How did you decide on Wisconsin? We always try to help the hockey community with the decision-making process, not by telling them what to do, but what were the factors that led you to go the U.S. college route and specifically to Wisconsin?
Yeah, I think I always wanted to go the U.S. college route. I liked the idea of getting outside of my comfort zone, getting away from home and doing something completely different. I know that that's not for everybody. A lot of people like to stay close to home, but Wisconsin was actually one of the closest schools that I could have gone to. So I think, I went on a lot of different official visits to schools, Ivy League, non-Ivy League, and ultimately I just loved the city of Madison, and I loved that the city was all about the Badgers. I think anyone that's been to Madison, that it's a special place, and being a Badger, I wouldn't trade it for anything. So yeah, I think what attracted me there was definitely the city, the coach, Mark Johnson. You only have to say his name. Not much more needs to be said. So playing for him, I knew that there was a lot of growth happening in the program, and that I would have a place there to succeed. And I'm really, really glad that I went there. It was actually Mark Johnson that transitioned me from being a forward to a defenseman in my junior year. And, I think back, and without him, I wonder, if I still would have been a forward and if I would have had the career that I did. So it was great 4 years in Wisconsin. I still love going back there, going to football games, tailgating and all of that stuff. It's a great place.
Sounds like it was the perfect fit. I'm always interested in this because there's such a fierce rivalry that exists between the Canadian women and the American women. And so many Canadian women choose the path of going through the American developmental system to get to a place where they're duking it out with those very same girls. What's that dynamic like when you go down and you're playing alongside women who, are you're probably amazingly close to, but
Mhm.
brewing underneath it is that constant kind of rivalry that is going to come to a head at some point with the very best of players.
Yeah, I think I was lucky in the sense that when I was at school, I wasn't playing on the national team, on the senior team, so I didn't have to play against my teammates at that point. But when I graduated, that was certainly the case. And Mark Johnson was the head coach of the U.S. Women's Olympic team at the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver. So my head coach at Wisconsin was the head coach of the other team for that tournament. There was players like Megan Duggan, Janelle Zog, Erica Lawler, Molly Engstrom, so many of them that I played with at school and then had to play against for a number of years. But I think as a hockey player, and you ask anybody, you get pretty good at compartmentalizing your emotions and your relationships when you're on the ice. It's like when you step out there, everything else kind of goes out the window. You have respect for those people as players. But at the end of the day, you're on the team you're on, and you'll do anything to win. So I never really had a hard time kind of separating those two things.
Meaghan, you bring up 2010. I'm proud to say I was in the building for that gold medal game. You're fortunate enough to know Jennifer Botterill. I was there with my dad. What was it like to be on that ice and to have that kind of a magical moment in your home country as well?
Oh gosh. I mean, to play in my first Olympics in Canada and win a gold medal on home soil, it was extremely special. I'll never forget standing on the blue line in I think it was GM Place. It was called at the time. I can't quite remember, but looking up in the stands, it was a sold out crowd, over 17,000 people, just a sea of red and white. And it was right before the gold medal game against the US, and you could not hear a thing. Like, it was the noise and the cheering, it was deafening. And that's something that I'll never forget, that moment. And it's extremely special, and it's a dream come true. It's hard to put into words just how incredible the feeling was to win and to get there. I think for me, those Olympics and winning a gold medal in Vancouver, the best word to describe it would be surreal. Just having that dream come true was incredible.
So gold medal in 2010, 2014, silver in 2018. What's the best celebration story from behind the scenes that you have that you can tell the audience? I know there's a lot you can't. What's your best celebration story you have from those wild times?
Well, I wouldn't say it was behind the scenes because it was all over the newspapers. Was after we won in Vancouver, where we went back on the ice and we were enjoying our Molson Canadians, and Tessa Bonham had gotten some cigars from Cuba, and we were celebrating and having a good time, and woke up the next morning and we were all over the newspapers, which was pretty shocking. But I think just, in the dressing room, and you're spraying champagne all over the place, and everybody's excited. I mean, I think everyone knows what those dressing room celebrations are like. But I think that's like the ultimate celebration that I've had, and probably the best story. We almost got kicked out of the Olympic Village, actually. It was, crazy, everything that went down the next 3 days. Marie-Philippe Poulin was underage and she was drinking. We had worn the wrong outfits to our media afterwards, and we were being threatened to get kicked out of the village. So I don't think people know that. I don't think people know that we almost got kicked out of the Olympic Village for that, but they let us stay in, so that was nice.
breaking news
Yeah.
provided on the Kenny and Renny show, and I have to say the after party was pretty good. Tyler Perry met me at the door and was wondering what the secret code was, but fortunately we snuck in there. What was how about you? I mean, Meaghan, we know that we were in the mix to make the team this year, coming back from an incredible injury. What was that process like, and to maybe not be able to go to this Olympics, but still to have a role in it? We'll get to that in a minute, but just the process of coming back from that injury this time around.
Yeah, I think, I look back on what happened, and for people that don't know, I guess, and a little bit more of a background. So I had my daughter in, it was January of 2019, came back from having her. And then the 2020 World Championships team, I was left off of that roster. So I had to work really, really hard to even, make the centralization roster, which is the Olympic tryout roster. There's 28 players that are named to that tryout roster. And so I found out it was May 13th, 2021, just last year, after the World Championships had been canceled, that I was being centralized. So I had worked my way from being left off the World Championships team to earning a spot to try out for the Olympic team. So that was huge, and it was something that I celebrated. It was great news. I just come back from having my second child, and it was something I was really proud of. And then it was 2 weeks later, just over 2 weeks later, May the 29th, I completely blew my knee out. Completely severed my ACL, tore my LCL, MCL, lateral meniscus, medial meniscus. Basically, my knee exploded in a nutshell. And that was a devastating injury. And the prognosis initially was that it was going to take 9 to 12 months for me to come back. And Hockey Canada actually wasn't going to centralize me anymore. They said, we just don't think that there's enough time. It's, as bad as it gets in terms of knee injuries. And I think it was 2 or 3 days after they told me that, I saw a video of Anders Lee, who had torn his ACL and was trying to come back for that. Or from that and play in the playoffs with the Islanders. And so he was like 12 weeks post-op and he was skating. And I saw him and I was like, oh my God, like, this is incredible. I need to talk to this guy. So I talked to him. He's been an amazing mentor for me over the course of my rehab process. And I met with a few surgeons and they said that, I could maybe do it. If everything went absolutely perfect, that there's a possibility that I could make it back in, 6 months. So the problem is they named the Olympic team at Christmas. So I had 5.5 months to make it back from an injury that I was told was going to take 9 to 12 months. But I completely immersed myself in the rehab process. I put absolutely everything I had into it, and I made it back and played 4 games with the team. I made it back in 5.5 months, which looking back now, I have absolutely no idea how I did it. It was a massive, massive accomplishment. And, I think a lot of people have asked me, am I disappointed that I didn't make the Olympic team? Of course, there's a part of me that is, but there's a bigger part of me that is just so proud of what I accomplished. I think it's one of the greatest accomplishments, that I've ever been able to do in my entire career. So really proud of that. I was told from the get-go that, playing 4 games in a 5.5 month tryout process, even if I make it back, they said it might not be enough. So I had prepared myself, I think, either way to make the team or not make the team. And like I said, just really proud of what me and my family and my rehab team were able to accomplish.
Boy, oh boy, your dad sure set you up to look at the positive side of things, because that's a great outlook on that situation, to focus on the pride that you felt and the work that you put in. That's something. Something else you just talked about kind of touched for me, because women have to deal with this in their daily lives. Every woman does, balance their careers and motherhood. There's an extra wrinkle to it in sports. So I cover a lot of curling. I'm good friends with Joan McCusker, who was with Sandra Schmirler's rink for that first time Canada won gold at the Olympics. And all their kids, the 4 ladies on that team, all their kids are born within a couple months of each other, because they had to plan motherhood around the Olympic cycle. So they would take some
I can
time
relate
off.
to that.
Yeah, that's what I'm interested. I'm interested for you in your life and where you wanted to go. Tell us a little about that wrinkle that's in your life where you've kind of got like this time frame where it's like, okay, we got to do this and we got to do this now, and I'm going to take this part of my motherhood and very much plan it because it needs to fall in line with the other goals that I want to achieve.
Yeah, I think I was lucky in the sense that, you know, when I stepped away to have my son, our first child, in 2014, I stepped away right after the Olympics. I had two gold medals, two Olympic gold medals already. So I think that, you know, I was lucky in the sense that, you know, I had largely accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. And so there wasn't, I didn't put a ton of pressure on myself to come back. And with him, it was, you know, another difficult thing for a lot of female athletes is sometimes it doesn't just happen like that. You know.
Yeah.
It took us a year to get pregnant, and so I ended up being away from hockey for almost 2 years, which is a long time. It was from the Olympics in 2014 in February. The next time I stepped on the ice and played a game was at a camp in January of 2016. So it was a long time to be away, and it's really, really tough. Your body obviously goes through a lot, and like you said, it's an extra wrinkle to throw in there, and there are a lot of other extras that we don't need to get into right now. But you know, that you have to take into consideration as a mother and what your body goes through. But my experiences with having my kids and coming back, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Awesome, Meaghan. How did the opportunity to work the Olympics come up? I know you've done some broadcasting work with Sportsnet, but I mean, how did that come up, and how did you enjoy it? Because you were excellent at it.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. I had a blast. And it was after I found out that I had been released from the national team. And I talked to my agent. I had done some work with Sportsnet covering some Oilers games last year, worked with Gene Principe, and I absolutely loved it. Broadcasting is always something that I've been really, really interested in. And you know, it's a super competitive industry and market, and I didn't know that if there would ever be a place for me there. So I was a little bit hesitant at first, but once I got my first taste of it and felt how much I enjoyed it, I knew that I wanted more. And I knew that, you know, being an analyst at the Olympics is something that, you know, a lot of people dream of doing for a really long time. So I feel very fortunate that the opportunity came up so quickly after I had been released from the team. I was also really lucky in the sense that, you know, as an analyst and a broadcaster, you have to do a ton of research, as you guys know. And the bulk of my research was done by having been a part of the team for years and years and years. I knew that team inside and out. So it was easy for me. I love those girls to be able to hop on the air and to talk about them and to talk about the team. And I absolutely enjoyed it. It was a little bit difficult for me, you know, to watch, especially the gold medal game. As proud as I was that, you know, I had come back from my injury the way that I did, you know, there's still that part of me that was disappointed that I wasn't there. Yeah. So there was a mix of emotions, but in the end, I look back and I wouldn't change a thing of everything that's happened over the past year.
So your TV stardom doesn't end with your work as an analyst. You were on season 2 of The Amazing Race Canada. I'm going to try and
we're going to go there, are we?
We're going to go here. And I'm going to try and smush 2 questions together because I want to just get your take on being on that show. But also John Montgomery, the host of that show, is a Manitoba boy. I grew up playing hockey against him, actually, and had a conversation with him at one time where there was a really good hockey player on his team named Ryan Robson who went on to play with the Brandon Wheat Kings. And so John was kind of like a distant secondary character to him. But John had told me he was always felt like he was an athlete and he didn't want his athletic career to end there. And so he was just trying to figure out how he could stay involved in athletics and ended up finding his way to the Olympics and winning a gold medal. So his path was a long one as well, similar to yours. So I want you to give me and I just, an idea of what it was like being on that show, what the value of that was for you. But do you meet at all with John and have any of these conversations about the two of you ending up being gold medalists and taking the long road to do that?
No, we've never talked about that. It would be an interesting conversation to have now. I know him through mutual friends, so definitely next time I see him, I'll have to ask him about a little bit more about his journey. But I mean, everyone, you think of John Montgomery and you want to have a pitcher of beer. I know I do. But yeah, being on that show was amazing. It was incredible. It was a once in a lifetime experience. And outside of the Olympics, one of the best experiences of my life. It was 3 days after we got home from Sochi and winning gold in Sochi, we got a call that we were cast to be on the show. And it was a whirlwind. It's crazy. You check into the show, they take away your phone, your wallet. You have no touch with the outside world. I didn't talk to my husband for 5 weeks, which I don't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. We're still together, so I'm going to say it's a good thing. But yeah, it was a crazy experience. You're completely sequestered when you're not racing in a hotel room with no phone, no TV, no internet. Just Spooner and I hanging out in a hotel room. And then, when we're not doing that, you're racing around the world, not knowing what is coming next. Like when you rip open those clues, you find out in that instant what you're doing, where you're going. You're so far out of your comfort zone. And I think for me, that's what made the experience so fun was, we were out of our comfort zones. We've spent our entire lives playing hockey, which, it's what we do every day. It's comfortable. We train, we practice, all of that. But being on the race, we were just out of our comfort zone every single day. And Spooner and I we were friends going into the show, but we weren't best friends. And now she's like a sister to me. So I think that's the best thing that I took out of the show was my relationship with her.
Meaghan, we can't let you go without talking about the women's game. Lots of talk of late about what direction things will be going. What way do you hope it goes? And are we stealing you full time on the broadcast side, or is there still some hockey to be played for Meaghan Mikkelson?
Well, I mean, my hopes, I think, are with everyone else's hopes in terms of the women's game. We need a professional women's league, not just for the players now, but for future generations. The game has come so far. There has been huge growth at the grassroots and development level. And in order for that to continue, there needs to be a viable professional women's league. Like you said, there has been a lot of talk. And there's been quite a bit of talk for the last little while. So my hope is that something will happen sooner rather than later. I can't say right now where exactly my future lies. I think everything is still pretty fresh right now. I'm focused on broadcasting and my work as an analyst. I'm really, really loving it. I think that I've found my next passion. So I think, I don't think it's a matter of if I continue doing it. I think it's just a matter of when it becomes, my full-time job. So right now I'm just soaking it all in and absolutely loving it.
Well, I love the time we've been able to spend with you because the attitude and how you approach things, it makes it clear to me why you've succeeded so much in hockey, why you're kicking butt as an analyst, and why we just expect that to continue going forward. It's been a real pleasure to talk with you. Thank you so much. Congrats on all your success in the past and currently. We've really appreciated this.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me on.
No problem.
Awesome, Meaghan. Thank you.
See you later.
Take care. Bye.
So straight from Meaghan, we're going to bring in Jason Bukala, scout extraordinaire, analyst extraordinaire, who just spent some time on the trade deadline show with us on Sportsnet. It was great to see you there, especially with Sammy, who is a big favorite of our audience here. Sammy's everyone's favorite, I find. No matter who works with him, they absolutely love the guy. I'm going to kind of go and back to the start. You come from Sudbury.
Yes.
That's home. I wanted to get an idea because here in Winnipeg, we get it. We've had 3 head coaches for the Winnipeg Jets. All 3 of them are Northern Ontario boys. And what I found is that area seems to really punch above its weight in the hockey world, similar to Saskatchewan is another one of those places. What makes Northern Ontario such a hockey powerhouse in its ability to punch above its weight?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting lead-in because, Bruno is Andrew Burnett's the head coach now in Florida. Sudbury, Derek McKenzie's there as well. Coincidentally, we were all in Florida together at the same time. I don't know what the odds of that are, having the director of scouting and the future head coach and the captain of the Florida Panthers all from Sudbury, all in the same building at the same time. But, Northerners are like people out west in the prairies. When we lock into something, whether it be, snowmobiling in the winter, ice fishing, we call our, in the Muskokas, of course, those aren't cottages. Those are like monstrosities or homes, right?
Right.
But when you get to the Sudbury, we call them camps still. And I still have an island up there. Derek McKenzie's on my lake. And I don't know. It's just a community, hardworking, honest people. I think what you see is what you get. And, I would be remiss if I didn't say that, what Bruno's doing in Florida right now as a head coach. I'm not surprised because anybody who's crossed paths, I don't know if you guys ever crossed paths with him on the tour as a player or when he was down in Minnesota even. This is one of the best human beings you'll probably ever meet, right?
Yeah, you know what? Sorry, Ken, I'm just going to jump in because I wanted to go there while we're there. Andrew Brunette is a guy who used to win me NHL drafts time and time again because he was that sleeper guy you could always get in later rounds and he'd rip it up. But you're going in a direction. I'd like you to actually expand on that because I think there was a lot of worries with the coaching change. I at the beginning of the year, I picked the Florida Panthers to go to the Stanley Cup final. A lot of that had to do with their coaching and the direction that I'd seen over the years. Coach Q would talk about the direction the team was going in, and it was going in the exact direction he said that it would. Now, there was potential for that to get upset with Andrew Brunette moving in, but that clearly hasn't happened. Why not? What is Andrew doing so well that he's taken a potential catastrophe, diffused it, and kept that team right on track?
Well, I think first of all, ego at the National Hockey League level with coaches is a factor. I mean, let's be honest; they're coaching at the highest level, and certainly they want to lay a foundation or make their mark on an organization. When you have Bruno who comes in, I think what a guy like that does is he surveys the landscape and says, I happened into this. This isn't, this wasn't my first choice when we hit training camp in September. We had a plan. He was learning from Q every step of the way. He's not the type of guy that would look around the room and say, I've got to do something different. I see what we're doing. I see what we've been building over the last number of years. I trust it. I think it's successful. It has upside, if you will. And so it's just the perfect situation for this type of unfortunate scenario to evolve, if that makes sense to you guys, because not everybody could handle it, Sean. I totally agree with that. But Bruno's a special human being, and he's really not made a lot of changes. He's just gone on. He's kind of nurtured it, if you will, and not put his own different stamp on what they were already doing.
Yeah, and Andrew's such an interesting guy. I mean, I talked with him when Paul Stastny, when I was working on his 1000th game, because they played together in Colorado, and they are like kind of kindred spirits. These guys who love hockey but also love other sports, and they're studying how Steve Nash runs the point and how they can what these soccer moves can mean for hockey. I mean, such a bright guy. And in terms of Derek McKenzie, Jay, I covered his rookie pro season with the Chicago Wolves when I was covering the Manitoba Moose. So another one of those great guys. Wait, so how did you get bitten by the hockey bug in that area?
Well, when I was playing Tier 2 here in Ontario, I was a goalie, and I lacked any sort of discipline. Like, I was drafted by the Sioux Greyhounds, went to a camp. They wanted me back the next year. I was one of those kids that said, well, I think I might want to go to the scholarship route. Started, playing Tier 2 in St. Mary's. Walt Tkachuk, there's a name for you guys from the Rangers days way back. He was my coach there, and with Danny Sagan. And then I moved over to the Stratford Culletons, they were called there. And that's where like Pronger came out of, and Rob Blake and Nelson Emerson. And anyways, recruited by a bunch of schools, but honestly, no discipline. And by the time I was 20 years old, you kind of stop and you look and you say, well, you kind of messed that up, right? So what are you going to do? So I turned it into coaching, which turned into management and coaching at the Tier 2 level, which turned into director of player personnel in Sault Ste. Marie with the Greyhounds for 4 years. And we were fortunate there because we had real good teams. Jeff Carter was coming through. Craig Hartsburg was our coach, came back from Philly as, he's the world junior coach, and he was our coach. And You guys have been around long enough. Success breeds opportunity, right? You start to meet more people, more scouts are in the building, wanting more interest in your players. So from Sault Ste. Marie to Nashville, learned under some fantastic people there. And then, geez, this is getting long. And then into Florida as the assistant head scout, and then eventually the director of scouting. It was a long journey. It's like the longest apprenticeship of your life. Anybody who thinks that they apprentice to be a mechanic, try and be a National Hockey League scout. It's like 15 years of your life before you know it.
I can in a huge way identify with having opportunities young and not taking them serious enough and blowing them, and then getting to that stage where you kind of realize the opportunity you had and think like, man, what was I thinking? I mean, that's my life story, and there's things that you can take from that. You can either learn lessons from it or ignore it. But I'm wondering what it is about your process, because I was listening to you on a podcast before this night. You know, I'd heard you given the idea of, I think you said you got what you deserved as far as your preparation into your career. What about, you know, the missed opportunities that you had? Have you taken and maybe applied the things you learned from that to scouting, or maybe the scouting specifically of players and seeing specific things about those players that maybe you learned those lessons and can kind of color in who's good and who's not?
Well, thanks for that question. I think it's really important for your viewers. And, you know, there's a lot of hockey people that listen to people like us talk, and they all want to be involved in hockey somehow, and they want to know, how do you get there? One thing I would say is that you're going to get way more no's than you're ever going to get yeses. And it's important to take a look in the mirror on a daily basis when you get a no, and stay motivated every step of the way. Don't go looking for somebody else to knock a door down for you. You're going to have to create something and keep moving forward at all times. So, you know, in my Florida situation right now, that's a perfect example, because we had built something that we thought was on the verge of being very special, a very good nucleus. Like our nucleus was very strong. And then, you know, Dale Talon gets relieved of his duties, and we all know what happens then. You know, somebody new comes in and they want to bring in the new bodies. I get it. I understand. I've been in the NHL for 17 years. I know how that works. But so I could sit around with those 2 years left on my deal, and I could, you know, wait for the phone to ring. You know, I could be calling all my colleagues and bugging them every day for a job, or I could do what I did, was create a platform at the Pro Hockey Group, like my company, that I felt we had some holes in our scouting fraternity that I could, if I ever got another job, or if I got into media, I didn't know where it was going to go. You don't know, right, when you're building something. But when you're starting to build it, you get excited about it. And really what it was is, I think we can do things better. And if I'm ever back in the game in any way, how can we do things better? So that's what I created. And my new platform has led into different opportunities, obviously the one at Sportsnet, and they have it exclusively. But the biggest thing I would always say, Sean, because, and I took a lot of pride in this, I would literally, especially when I was the director, I'm no lie, I'd get 1,000 resumes a year from people around the world, because when you're the director, obviously you're looking after Europe, you're looking after the world, right? I honestly made a point of, every time I got something, even if it was like 3 words or 5 words, you got to return something to people, because every one of those people that reached out to me, I was once one of them. And I know it sounds kind of catty, you know, people can say that, you know, just easily say that, but I didn't realize some of the relationships I drummed up in the business until I was out of the fraternity, and realized that I treated some people really well, respectful, kept plowing forward, and then they started coming to me, which was really rewarding.
How about Jason, you touched on it here, but I mean, some of the things that people don't understand the job of the director of scouting in terms of distributing the staff. And I mean, how about even, you know, your own schedule? I mean, I've talked a few times with Mark Hillier, you know, saw him, you know, one day he's at the Winnipeg Ice game, but then the next day, you know, you're planning for a tournament in Europe. I mean, how about that part of the process, and how do you determine what's important to watch at what time of the year?
Well, so Hilly and I have a lot in common, because the size of our franchises, in terms of the model, the internal model, the budget, I'm not going to call them limitations. What we were afforded in the piggy bank, we're providing so much. And so, full disclosure, you guys in Winnipeg are very lucky. You have one of the hardest working staffs in the league. Trust me when I tell you, that is one of the hardest working staffs in the league, bar none. But for me, we had a staff of 11 people worldwide. At the end, I was upwards to about 175, 180 nights a year on the road. lots of air miles, lots of time zones, all that. Europe 3 or 4 times a year. Those trips are usually around 15 days at a time. So a lot of travel, but really what I tried to do was empower people in all areas of the world to produce results and produce players for me. I didn't want to go search of players, because I hear of a player in North America that's playing in Russia. I'm not going to believe that secondhand. I'm going to go to Vadim Podrazov in Russia. Vadim, I'm hearing this, and he's going to tell me in his own way if they're good or they're bad or whatever. But you have to trust your people, especially when you're on the road all the time, because you can't know everything. And any scouting director in the league who thinks that he knows everything and he can run the entire draft from rounds 1 to 7 is kidding himself, or he's too full of himself. I'll tell you right now, it's an impossibility. You have to trust the people around you. You work hard, set the tone, be a leader, but then trust the people around you.
I think it's fascinating. I find your job fascinating. The idea of being in the position you're in, trusting the people around you. The thing about trusting the people around you is there's a lot of voices, right? You've got a scouting staff. And so I always think of this situation. When Mark Scheifele was drafted by the Winnipeg Jets in 2011, it was said they went off the board. I don't know what you would have known at that time, whether or not you thought they went off the board, but I thought it was a brave pick for them to make with their very first pick. And from what I've been told behind the scenes is there was one scout definitely that went to bat for Mark Scheifele and said, this is the guy. And I always thought, in a room full of scouts with a director of scouting, how did they listen to that one voice, and how do you kind of, the push and pull to get to the, listen to this scout, listen to that scout, everyone's got their guys. How did you sift through that in your job to make sure that while you're trusting your people, you can't do it all yourself, you're making sure that you prioritize the information correctly?
Well, so in that situation there, and I'm just taking a guess here, but like Chris Snell's been scouting for the Jets for a lot of years here in Ontario. And so Sneller, he would probably be presenting his argument, if you will, or his strong conviction on the player. Chevy takes a lot of time as well on the road. He's one of those general managers that hits the pavement and goes to see high-end players. So that is very important because that lessens the danger of having to convince the general manager of the pick, if you get my drift. Because like last time was a prospects game in Kitchener, and I was there with Sammy, and there was some GMs there, and if a player pops off at the prospects game and he's outstanding, and it's the only time that general manager sees him outside of maybe the World Championships at the end of the year, that leaves it's misleading to a degree, right? Where guys like Chevy might see a player like Scheif 3 or 4 times a year, and then he's actually looking for Chris, and Mark's going to run the room, but he's looking for that passion. He's looking for that conviction, right? And then if the guy in Minnesota is saying, well, it should be my guy, or the guy in Finland is saying, that's where Mark, as the leader in the room, is going to look to Chevy and say, my vote is this. These are the reasons why. And ultimately, it's going to be Chevy's call. And Zinger goes out a lot too, right? Like, so they all do it. They do. That's what I mean by a hardworking group. Like, your group there is special. They all go. But I didn't think the Scheifele pick was erratic. I thought it was a nice opportunity. And listen, we've made picks in Florida. We picked Spencer Knight in the first round a couple years ago in Vancouver. And, some people were like, oh, because, the word on the street already was we were going to sign Bobrovsky. Why would you sign Bobrovsky to 7 years and then draft a goalie in the first round? There's just never any sure thing. You've got to draft the best possible player. And full disclosure, we tried to trade back a few spots because we thought, oh, maybe, somebody else is picking them right behind us. So it was one of those situations where we went for the best player.
Sort of jump around a bit, Jason. Obviously, there's a strong Manitoba contingent in that game last night. Who were some of those guys that maybe stood out? I know Sam was just mentioning Denton Matejchuk had a pretty good showing last night.
My favorite player in the game. He really was. He had a presence. He was the captain of Team White. This kid last night, not only was he involved between the whistles and doing what he does, but after the whistle, it's almost like an all-star game, but they all want to win, right? The kid was taking charge in defensive zone faceoffs, telling everybody where he was going to be, where they needed to be. Active in the, joining the rush, active on the blue line. He did a lot of small things in a all-star. It's not an all-star game, but that's the best thing I can come up with. In a top prospect scenario, he did a lot of little things that showed me this kid's a leader. He's got a ton of upside. He was really impressive. There was another kid, his D partner from Swift. I don't know where all the kids are from, like their hometowns, but the Pickering kid who plays in Swift, he was the same, made a lot of little subtle plays, and they really complemented each other very well. But I got to say, well, right from Winnipeg, though, I know, like, now you got me talking a little bit here. Like, obviously, I got to talk about Geeky and Savoy, right? Mm-hmm. Geeky did everything pretty much that I thought he needed to do. He needs some work on some things. There's some things there that he's going to have to work on that I thought he was exposed on a little bit. His edge work to the right side was a little bit disjointed. I didn't think that he could lay the leg down off the rush and kind of power to the net on this coming off the left side, his edges. And then Savoy, he was special. Like, man, this guy, he's got a little bit of Johnny Gaudreau, Patrick Kane. Like the puck on the stick is, it's actually fun to watch. It's almost like a little bit of road hockey when you're watching it sometimes. It's like, wow, that was pretty cool, I can't hear Sean. Can you hear
Sean? Me? Now we can't. Yeah, now your volume is down. Quick one. I watched the ice twice this year. Man, same thing. So the second game, Savoy, absolute wizard with the puck, couple of cross ice passes, and it's funny. Geeky, super highly touted. The first time I saw him, he was, I would say, just slightly above average, and the second time I saw him, he was excellent. So it's so interesting, right? You talk about, if you only see him one time. So if I had no expectations, I would have thought Geeky was great the first game. But I thought he had a great first period, and then the game kind of got out of reach, and then I wouldn't say he went away, but he sort of faded into the background where I was expecting him to be dominant pretty much every shift. And then I remembered he was just 17 years old playing against a bunch of 19-year-olds. So I think both those guys are excellent players, and I think they're going to be fun to watch. And their playoff run should be interesting too, because they're a whole lot younger than Edmonton should those two teams meet.
Well, and Edmonton's a juggernaut, as we know, and that's going to be interesting, right? Because we're going to see how much more responsible or where they go, how they can elevate against a team like that. And so Geeky is a bigger body. You would expect that he's probably going to transition potentially a little bit easier into that scenario. What I'm going to be looking for in Savoy is not so much what he can do on the offensive side, because it's elite, but if he's like a 70-30 player, 70 being offense, 30 being his activity on the back check and detail, he's going to have to somehow become like a 60-40, because they're going to need him to score. But that extra little bit of detail on the defensive side at playoff time, that's as good as a goal or an assist.
You guys got me here?
Better, yeah.
I got you, yeah.
Okay. What I absolutely love about this conversation is how open you're being with your analysis, and it's the same thing that we saw from you at the trade deadline. I'm interested in, your currency is your ideas and your expertise, which you're handing over like this. Now, is going into broadcast like you did with Sportsnet at the trade deadline, or even right now, and kind of sharing your ideas, is there ever a worry that you're giving away too much in these conversations, or is it a showcase for maybe that next opportunity?
Actually, neither, if that makes sense, because what I'm doing now and what I'm able to project, hopefully, is like some of these kids last night, they fly home to wherever they're flying home, right? And they're sitting there, their agent's going to tell them that they heard this from somebody, and their coach is going to say, I saw this. And I think that what I can do now as a non-biased type of interpretation, I can give back to some of not only your audience, but also some of these players and kids coming through in this scenario. I'm giving some unsolicited type of feedback, I guess, if you will. So on the broadcasting side, I'm either going to make somebody happy or they're going to be angry with me. That's a no-win situation. It might be the same on the players too. But I've got this vault of experience, I believe, that I've accumulated over several years, and lots of drafts and lots of different scenarios. And I think it's fun to be able to share it. And it's almost like the hot stove lounge for me. I can just talk to you guys and take it or leave it, right? Because I'm not always right. But I think that I can offer some observations that otherwise might not come from as well of a schooled source.
Right on. Well said. We'll talk about the broadcasting in a bit, but so back in your time with Florida, what is the role of the director of amateur scouting on trade deadline day, especially too? I mean, not necessarily now when the team is going guns a-blazing, but when a team is maybe in sell-off mode, how often is the GM kind of tapping into your resources when it comes down to? I mean, I'm thinking of an example. This isn't a great example of the Jets with the Kopp trade, how that would be if they weren't looking for Morgan Barron, if they were looking for a guy who either was just drafted or is in his second year maybe.
Well, so it's customized to a variety of scenarios now, Ken, because if you're picking up a player now who's under contract, of course you're gonna have the capologist gets involved. So I'm gonna dummy it down for you and make it as simple as possible. The general manager comes to me and says, we're going to be buyers at the trade deadline. To be buyers, we're going to have to give up some players, okay? I need the latest on these 5 players in our organization because those are the guys I'm getting the most calls on. And then we're going to strategize, obviously, in a negotiation scenario. We don't want to give away the guy at the top of the list. We're going to try and give away the 5th guy, right? So you're going to strategize that. Here's the reasons why you present it to the general manager. Here's where I think he's going compared to this guy. Here's where the fit is in the organization. The flip side of that is if you're on the other side of the ledger and you're selling, what can we pick up in the other organization, whether it be a college player, a junior player, or picks. So if you look at their depth charts and you say to the GM, I don't love this set of amateur players. I don't forecast them to be a Winnipeg Jet. I don't think that guy's going to be a third-line player. I know Chevy wants to build a team with a little bit of size, a little bit of grit in the middle. I don't see that being a fit. So then we look out to their drafts and how many picks they have. We'll look at their grid, and we'll look at things like, do they have 2 seconds? Do they have 2/3? In the second, is it their second and Arizona's second? Because we want Arizona second, right? So a lot of strategy that way, but the simplest way I can tell you is Dale will come to me, give me the latest on this group, give me the latest on this group, give me the latest on these guys in Europe, for example. Could be some free agents even, because there could be a secondary deal in the mix there. Like if you give up an asset, you might now start targeting a college free agent who's going to the NCAA tournament right now, and you've already established a little bit of a relationship. A lot of moving parts, but the simplest way I can tell you is I would present them with the best possible options on both sides of the ledger, and then they take it up the ladder from there.
Jay, I don't know if this is how scouts would measure their success. I would think it is, but when you think back over your career, what are some of the finds that you are most proud of? What are some of the players that you picked up that you saw something that a lot of other people didn't see?
I don't want to be the guy that sits there and pats myself on the shoulder. I was the leader of the room, but it was really a group effort. Okay, so obviously if you're splitting hairs, I would be the hammer there. But generally speaking, we came to some really good conclusions. So around the league right now, like Mackenzie Weegar was almost the last pick in the draft, and he made Team Canada's long list this year. That's on Mackenzie, though. They got to put in the work, but I think that's a great find. Paul Gallagher was our scout in the East Coast back then. He did a great job. We got booed in New Jersey when we drafted Barkov. I mean, if you guys think back to that, that was the Seth Jones. I've never been booed on stage before, especially like when you're in New Jersey of all places. This is kind of odd, and that was a one-day draft. I don't know if you guys remember back to that. That was there. The league's like so we started off the day by getting booed early in the morning, but it was supposed to be the Seth Jones draft, and right? It was supposed to be Seth Jones, McKinnon, and then it was supposed to be Seth Jones, McKinnon, pick your order, Druin. Well, yeah. we get up there and we draft Barkov, and it took some people by surprise. And Lindholm went 5th. So think about that for a second. Like, pretty good pool there, right? But I would say that organizationally, that became a foundational piece. Like he speaks for himself. That one there. We moved some guys out too. Like Josh Brown has moved out as a 6th-round pick to Ottawa, now Boston. Mike Matheson moved to Pittsburgh. I think it's really important that my job isn't to coordinate the organization in terms of the NHL depth chart. It's to give the general manager as many assets as possible to either upfill the roster or sell it off somewhere else so you can pick up something else. So, when they can move Matheson out to bring Hornquist in because they wanted leadership and goal scoring, that's a win for everybody. So, I don't know. There's some guys on the come see though. I want you to make a note. There's this kid playing down in Charlotte. Cole Schwint was a 3rd-round pick a few years ago. He's going to be in the NHL sooner than later, and I'm anxious to see him arrive because he was an underdog, big guy, been traded in the Ontario League, needed to work on his skating, great face-off guy, 16 goals. I think he's going to score 20 in the American League in his rookie year this year. There's some on the come see, I guess is what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah, we were so impressed by Barkov in Finland at the Global Series. What he and Patrick did to sell the game during those few days was just so unbelievable to witness firsthand. But though at the time, what did you see in him that you knew the projection was going to be elite superstar?
So when we brought all those kids in for their final round of interviews in New York, the one thing that stood out with him right away when he walks in, you guys have all seen it. You've been in enough rooms where you've got like that really mature rookie, and then you've got that spastic rookie who's got, his eyes are this big and he's just loving life. Barkov came in, he was already playing pro, he was already in a man's body, but very quiet, reserved. I don't know if you guys found that over there in the Global Series, because Patrick, and it's interesting, Line A and Barkov, those two personalities. But Barkey, all he wanted to do was be a pro player in the National Hockey League. That's all he wanted to do. All he talked about his whole interview is, I just want to be a pro. I just want to win. And he lived and breathed hockey all day, every day. He had no distractions. It was almost robotic, too good to be true type of a thing. But you left the room, you're like, how can you not draft that guy? He's all in already. Like you can feel it, And let me tell you, after McKinnon went, our phone was ringing off the hook because he was going next somewhere else. Literally, everybody from 3 to 10 were calling. We had some really strong offers, but obviously none good enough to make us change our mind. He's a special player. Yeah,
no doubt. So you've got former players who step in as scouts. You've got hockey fans who step in. A scout can be, can come from all walks of life. And have varying degrees of success in doing so. Some former players make terrible scouts. In your mind, what's the common theme of when you, as a director of scouting, you're trying to find the right people to set you up for success? In your mind, what's the common theme in a person that makes them a great scout?
Work ethic. I mean, it sounds simple, but you have to get places and get into little holes in the hockey universe that other people don't go into. I mean, it's as simple as that. We're like anybody else. We have good days and bad days. I'm not feeling great. You're in Europe for 16 days. I can't skip a day. You got to get on the train. You got to go wherever you got to go. There's no substitute for the amount of intel that you can consume. So the game has changed, right? We've got analytics that are involved now. The pandemic introduced more of more leverage for the video scouting universe. And then, of course, you got boots on the ground. You'll never replace boots on the ground because you're going to see all the subtleties in game. Kid gets taken off the power play, they're going to commercial break, or they don't catch it on video, and now he's giving the stink eye to the coach because he's upset about it. It tells you something, right? You got to be in the building to see that. But you have to be able to take all of this information. You have to be able to take the analytics department as a tool and consume it all, and then spit out hopefully the best possible result on the other end. Full disclosure, I was very pig-headed when analytics started. I was, because I didn't understand how there could be so many different concepts of it, and I never really understood. Like, they never gave me a list, but they had all these opinions and these numbers. We're out there, right? Like, we're in plain sight. Here's our list. Here's our opinion. You know what it is, Ken and Sean, because there it is. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Where these other things, I don't know if anybody can sit there and say they truly understand analytics. Like, you guys can't. Could you go out for a beer and say with your buddy, yeah, this is how all that works? I don't think anybody can do that. So I was a little pig-headed at first, but I recognized in the long run that it's a valuable tool. The more information we can get, let's get it all together. And if you're a smaller market franchise, like we were in Florida, Winnipeg even, you need as much as you can get in that scope, because your decisions, you need to hit on more 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round guys than somebody else, because you can't go buy those players.
Sean, I think we're going to have to welcome Jason back to one of our post-game shows for some analysis here. This has been absolutely awesome. Just how about a quick thought on the Jets, or do you have something else, Sean, that you want to get to?
Well, in the vein of what you were just talking about, I wanted to kind of dig into this last one, if you don't mind staying for just a little bit longer. One of my favorite stories. One of my favorite stories I've read over like the last 8 years is from our guy Mark Spector out of Edmonton. He did a story on Colton Parayko, how Colton Parayko, this giant of a hockey player who looks phenomenal, kind of fell through the cracks. And he told this story about the scout who found him early and kept showing up. And he just did a good job of coloring it. This scout just kept showing up to watch his games and would kind of brace himself with his coffee in his hand when he walked out into the stands, because he thought this was the time he's going to walk in. And now the building's full of scouts. And it never happened. And so St. Louis was able to get him further into the draft than they would have expected. And even then jumped up a couple rounds ahead of what they thought they could take him for, because they knew that they had something. We're so worried about losing it. But I wonder, you just talked about, I mean, there's cameras everywhere. There's analytics that you can lead into. But I think people feel like it's kind of like there's no rock left unturned anymore, that there's a camera everywhere and that it should be easier for you guys to do your job. But give me an idea of where we are now in the ability to find those under the radar guys that maybe we think that shouldn't exist anymore because of technology and numbers and analytics.
Well, historically, if we really wanted to, like, I'm 51 years old. So if I wanted to think back to when I was a younger hockey fan, even like in my teens and stuff, there were players that were being found back then by scouts who relied on maybe a fax machine, maybe a letter or a UPS document, stuff like that. The Doug Gilmores of the world were getting drafted like in the 7th round, and there was all kinds of finds. The concept of trying to get as much information as possible has always existed. Technology is advanced, and now it's given us the opportunity to, I guess, turn over more stones, as you say, Sean. But it can be dangerous. And the only reason I say that is because if you get a staff, let's say you have a 10-man staff, and half of them rely on analytics and video, and they don't think that they should be out there traveling, hitting the pavement and seeing guys live. That's a dangerous thing to do. You have to recognize that all of this that we do, those are tools, okay? If you want to be the organization to use it as a full-blown decision-making mechanism, that's fine. That's up to you guys. For me, there's no substitute for being in the building, and these are all extra tools. I think scouts in the 70s had different tools. It's just the evolution of everything that we do.
How do you think Kevin Cheveldayoff handled the buying and selling part of the trade deadline this year, Kevin or Jason?
Well, I love Andrew Kopp, so I mean, I think that's a massive hole, and I think they're going to have a hard time filling that hole. I believe that the Jets, they're not as good a team when Andrew Kopp is out of the lineup. I think that we can all agree on that. Over 20 minutes a night, hard-nosed player, can produce offense, can do a whole bunch of things for the group. So I think that's a huge, it's a loss, and I think they would agree with that. But the rest of it, there's some risk reward in there. The Appleton, bringing him back, I know they really like him, and he fits their mold of a Winnipeg Jets, so there's some trust there. It's a depth addition. I think we would all agree on that. Like, he is what he is. He's not going to score 20 goals, and if he does, then that's fantastic, right? And then you get into the Sanford one. Sanford, for me, has always left me wanting more. He's a big body who moves very well. He's long. He can play in a variety of roles, but he hasn't seemed to figure it out yet. Hopefully he will, but that one's on the come see for me. The Barron kid, he's, I think he's like maybe 23 or so right now. I'm doing this off the top of my head. But yeah, so, he's got good size too. Cornell product. He scored a lot at Cornell, and I don't know if you guys know this or not, but like Cornell historically are a pretty low-scoring college program. So he did very well, and I think that there could be some more possibilities for him. We'll see, but the one loss was unfortunate, right? They lost the Smith kid to Arizona in out of the college, and there's risk reward in that stuff with college. It's tough, right? Like you just hope these kids are going to sign, because I'm sure they put a lot of development tools into them. But in summary, they're pretty flush with picks. They got all their firsts going forward. I think for the next 3 years, I don't think there's a lot of holes in their draft grid. So all things considered, it wasn't bad at all. It wasn't bad at all. And I still think that they got enough I think their upper echelon players had more to give in the first half. There's been a lot of moving parts. I get it. But I'm not impressed with some of the upper echelon players. I think they have more in the tank. Maybe they can just push them into the playoffs.
Jason, we really appreciate all your insight here. I got to say this, your work with the Florida Panthers and where they are now, it speaks for itself. But I'll say this as a broadcaster as well. It's my belief, if you want to connect with your audience, the number one thing you got to do is be honest and truthful with them. And what I've been most impressed about talking with you is that you've got a lot of this information that you convey in a professional way. But not once during this entire interview do I feel like you held back. You gave us everything that you had in your answers and completely honest and truthful. And what I think it did was just really enlightened. I know I feel enlightened, and I'm sure our audience does as well. So Ken had said it. We do not only these long form shows, but we do analysis and breakdown of the games afterwards. You are welcome to come on anytime you would like, because boy, oh boy, you've taught me things just in your short comments about the Jets that I hadn't seen before this. So I just want to say thank you so much. We really appreciate you stopping by.
Anytime, guys. I'm glad you reached out, and you know where I am, so drop me a line.
Awesome. Thanks again. Tremendous.
Thank you so much, Jay. And there he goes. Absolutely phenomenal. That was good stuff. You know what I really liked about that, Ken, what he dropped in, never mind a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, but he kind of unprompted gave us a real interesting look at the Winnipeg Jets scouting staff and how they're seen around the league. I mean, we talk about this time again about the way that the Jets draft, and we talk about them being one of the better drafting teams or scouting departments in the NHL. Well, he just gave us a real good look at why that is.
Oh man, just fantastic stuff. And I mean, yeah, I mean, like I said, to one of the ice games that I went to, there's 4 or 5 members, or 3 or 4 members of the Jets scouting staff are there, and they do they're a hardworking group, as Jason told you. But it's one thing for people that are around our market to say, oh, they're a hardworking group. Look at all these guys they've got. But when you see it coming from respected people from other organizations, that's when I think other people can really appreciate that value. But man, just 2 outstanding guests again. This is why we enjoy doing these shows, right? I mean, just fantastic stuff all around, incredible insight and analysis. And I mean, great to be able to call both of those people colleagues. Meaghan and Jason, both Sportsnet colleagues right now. And again, fantastic broadcasters, and more importantly, just tremendous people, right? I mean, that's another great takeaway.
Meaghan was, I mean, this is why I love having the conversation, and you usually spearhead these conversations with our guests on the show, but you do a really good job of going back and kind of digging the starting points out. And I think that it's always really important, because in talking with Meaghan, the conversations that she had about her dad and how she kind of shaped and the process. Again, I mean, it sounds simple. The process is more important than the outcome. But I can tell you this. I remember being a younger player, and I think this is one of the ways that you and I differed. But I remember when I was younger, and I had a lot of opportunities when I was growing up and playing hockey and interest from scouts. But I like to go have a good time, and I had a girlfriend that I wanted to spend a lot of time with, and I wanted to make it to parties. And I remember there used to be this kind of mindset of, yeah, but if I try and go and do this and take time away from this and work out and eat this way and all that kind of stuff, what if I don't make it? I'll have wasted all that time. And the one thing that you see from guests like Meaghan is, no, that push, that process of pushing and trying your hardest to get somewhere, that's the actual value. It's not if you make it or don't make it. The value is in pushing and being able to say that, like she had said, that you put your best foot forward, and that's the process. And it's interesting, because talking with Jay, it sounds like him as a player felt like he didn't do that, right? So that it's such an interesting contrast between the two guests, as you've got one who basically said it didn't matter if I made it or not. What mattered is that I was going to throw everything we had into it, and that gave her the results and made her special in her field. Well, Jay is now special in his field because he took the lessons of not doing that, of not applying himself to the most, and takes the lessons that he learned from not getting to where he wanted to go and applies them to this new role. And I think it's just a really interesting take from 2 different sides, 2 different approaches, but how you can still take that, learn from either approach, and get to where you want to go. I thought that's fascinating.
Oh, just tremendous. I mean, the thing with, this is the problem, with women's hockey, people, some people just tune in once every 4 years. They have no idea Meaghan's working a full-time job and trying to play hockey on the side so she can survive. The one thing we didn't get into with Meaghan that I wish we had, but the fact that she shared her story on Instagram to deal with the emotional investment of coming that close and to talk about the pride she took. But then still, I mean, how about the raw emotion of her speaking about how, even though she's thrilled for her teammates, she knows that should be my gold medal, right?
That was heartbreaking, yeah.
But like, to be able to articulate that, and to be not only to be watching this, Sean, you're on national TV breaking down every moment of that game while feeling all of these emotions. I mean, that just tremendous stuff. I absolutely loved it, and just awesome that these people continue to invest their time and share their stories with us. It's just makes it a heck of a lot of fun.
Well, I got to say, he opened up a Pandora's box by saying we know where he is. We're going to be asking him all the time. We should get him on more often. There's early indications, Ken, that there's a possibility that we would do a draft day show for Kenny and Renny, which would be a ton of fun to do. And I'll say this, if we do, we got to get my man Dwighty, who I always brag about and talk about as being the AAA coach for the Eastman Selects hockey team. He was Denton's coach a couple of years back.
There you go.
Has been telling me about Denton for years and has been saying, I'll tell you this, Ken, because once he started telling me about him, I started looking at him in the scouting registry, and he was around there, and maybe he could be a first round pick. But Dwighty has been saying to me for a long time, this guy is better than people are giving him credit for. He is going to be something else. Dwight says no doubt in his mind, is he going to be an NHLer? He thinks a significant one as well. So I would love if we get a chance. I mean, I would love to hear the conversation that we could have between Jay and my buddy Dwighty, right, who saw the beginning of this and could give us some inside notes on that, and then get the scouts' perspective on where he was, where he's got to. Would be a phenomenal conversation. I'm looking forward to having it going forward.
Small world, Manitoba, Kevin Bacon syndrome. I played baseball against his dad, Jason. Incredible human being. Also, they're a great family, and a lot of athletes in that family. And I mean, it's just awesome to see. I mean, when I texted Sam literally just before the show started, unprompted, who caught your attention? He says Denton Matejchuk. So great stuff.
Did Jay. So there you go. He was the big winner from that game. I'm going to hop on the phone with Dwighty, who I believe is in a series right now with the Winnipeg Wild. These are. Hey, we talk all the time about the ice and how you've got one of the best junior hockey teams in all of Canada playing right here. People should get out and see that. But I believe there were 3 AAA teams in the top 10 in Canada this year, and I think that includes the Winnipeg Wild. I know it included the AAA Eastman team. They're squaring off right now, so that should be some good hockey. Dwighty sent me a video of one of his guys pulling off the Michigan with a guy right on him in their game. Like, there's some high-level hockey going on there. So we're going to go on and on here.
Last quick one. Manitoba Junior Hockey League playoffs getting underway, I think, this week as well.
Great stuff going on. Ken, I appreciate you. Chat room, again, I'm not trying to ignore you. There's great stuff going on in there. We just don't want to disturb our guests in this one. It's a little bit thinking deeply, but we will return full-fledged on your comments tonight after a game between the Winnipeg Jets and the Ottawa Senators. It's a huge one. Like I said, it'll be a big win if they win, but it would be a massive loss if they lost. That's just where the Jets are right now. So let's get together. Let's reconvene tonight after the game and talk about it. You, Ken, myself, and the chat room. Let's get at it. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you later tonight.